What's up, Joe? What's up, everybody? This is Sports360, and I'm your host, Jeff Fannell. Today we have sports agent Rex Gary with us. Rex hails from the Philly area, and he's a veteran agent with experience in both baseball and hockey. And he's here to talk to us about the agent business and to share his views on all kinds of things, from pitch clocks and walk-up music in baseball to Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, and Philly cheesesteak. You're going to want to hear this one, so hang with us. This is Sports 360. Well, I'm pleased right now to have with me Rex Gary, veteran agent of both baseball and hockey, and he's here joining us on Sports 360. Rex, how are you today?
I'm great, Jeff. How are you? Great to talk.
I'm doing good. I'm doing great. We're finally getting some good weather here in the Northeast. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, so I'm doing great.
Me too, although my Sixers took it on the chin last night, but I'm still confident they'll pull through.
Yeah, we'll see. They got a good team, Rex. I mean, they really do have a good team, and we'll see how it goes over the next couple of days. But they're kind of young, and so it's going to be interesting to see how they respond to having a little bit of a setback.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Game 2 is going to be huge, but they had a week off. They weren't hitting their threes. Celtics played great. I think Game 2 will be a different story.
Right. Well, Rex, let's talk about you a little bit. You've been in the agent business, in the sports business for a long time. How many years, Rex, have you been an agent?
Well, I was working at a law firm in Philadelphia in the late 1980s, and I'd been doing arbitration cases for baseball players. An old friend of mine, Jim Turner, was working for a sports agent in St. Louis, and that was a time when arbitration was becoming much more of a factor in the player's ability to make money. It was something that was very active back then, and there were a lot of cases every year, as we've seen in recent seasons again. But teams were armed with experienced attorneys, litigators, arguing their case, and a lot of times back then, agents were just coming in, trying to argue the case on their own, whether or not they were lawyers or had any type of litigation background, and players weren't having the success that they wanted to have, and so some agents were reaching out to lawyers who were litigators to help them argue their cases, and Jimmy asked me to do that for your and my very good friend Phil Bradley, which was my first case
Right.
back in, I'm going to say 86 or 87, and I learned the industry through that, got very close with a number of people at the Players Association who sort of helped me prepare the cases. And in 1992, Jim Turner and I started Turner Gary Sports, and I left my firm and was able to hit the ground running and been working with players ever since.
And see, that's an interesting story because, today a lot of people, young people, they purpose to get into the agent business. And that's not really what happened with you, it sounds like, right? You were practicing law, you were a litigator, and then you got this opportunity. But let's talk about that a little bit. For young people today, young professionals who want to get into the game, maybe they don't get a break like you did or an opportunity like you did. Is there anything that you would say, and I'm sure you've counseled young people along the way, but what would you say today to someone who said, hey, I want to get into the sports business?
Well, with my experience, I was lucky. I mean, it was nothing, back then, sports law courses was not what it is today. I didn't have a sports law class, and I love sports. I played sports my whole life, but it was not something that I planned to do. I mean, I began my career as a criminal prosecutor and then moved to the law firm. So I was lucky, and I think what I would tell young people is, you have to keep your eyes and ears open. Yes, this is something that you may want to pursue, and learn through people who are in the business, talk to people, network, but also be patient. You don't know when an opportunity is going to come your way, and do everything you can to prepare for it. But I just think for particularly lawyers, what I tell law students, to me, go practice law, learn what it's like to have a client come to you and ask you and pay you for your judgment, and that feeling, as you know, Jeff, of that relationship, that fiduciary relationship, where somebody is coming to you for your judgment, and they're depending upon you, to give them the right advice and steer them in the right direction. That's an incredible feeling and an incredible responsibility. So I just think that type of experience is something that these young people, particularly young law students, need to experience, and that prepares them for whatever they do next in sports, whether it's working for a team, representing players, or any of the other various types of jobs in the sports industry.
Yeah, you make an excellent point when you talk about the responsibility. It's a tremendous responsibility when, agents or players or, team officials, if you work for a team, come and seek your advice. And one of the things I tell those who aspire to get into the business is the importance of being professional and, not being a fan if you work on the player's side, or, get carried away with the perks of the job if you work on the club side. But to understand that, you have to be professional, and, your decision making and your judgment, which people are looking for, could impact millions of dollars for someone. And so, the importance of being professional, being diligent, doing your homework, doing your job is something that is so important. And I think that's something that has to get across to young and old alike, but especially for those who are trying to break in.
No doubt about it. And again, you just never know what opportunity is going to come your way. And, your career is heading in one direction, and all of a sudden, here's an opportunity that comes your way that takes you in another direction. And, I having several decades of experience, and a lot of friends, both lawyers and non-lawyers, I've seen where careers are heading in one direction, and then all of a sudden somebody takes advantage of an opportunity and heads off in another direction. And just the more experience that you have, the more people that you get to know and learn from, that's what prepares you for what comes next. And I just can't emphasize enough the importance of seeking knowledge through other people. And what's great about this business, and one of the very best things about this business, is in sports, I mean, you meet so many people from so many different backgrounds, and they may be players, they may be coaches, they may be managers, they may be general managers, former players, successful business people who move into the sports world. And there's so much you can learn from all these people. And I just think that being open and asking questions and learning through other people is invaluable.
Sure. Now, Rex, in terms of some of the work that you've done, I know that, you spoke a little bit about baseball and some of the work you've done there, and I'd like you to describe that But also tell us some of the other things you've done. I know, for example, that you continue to do a lot of work, or each year you do work in hockey with salary arbitration. But give us a flavor for some of the work that you've been able to do over the course of your career.
Well, when we started Turner Gary Sports, we were able to hit the ground running. I mean, we had some great people and some very good players that we represented. I mean, two people who are Hall of Fame. One, Ryan Sandberg, in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Joe Carter, who's in the Canadian Hall of Fame, had a tremendous career with the Toronto Blue Jays, and people like Phil Bradley, who I've mentioned, and is a mutual friend of ours. So we were able to kind of hit the ground running and, continue to build our business on the baseball side. And as I told you, my entree into the business was through salary arbitration, and hockey adopted a salary arbitration system. And in the mid-90s, I was asked by the NHL Players Association if I wanted to help them represent their players in salary arbitration. And, obviously that was a no-brainer. I love hockey. I grew up here in Philly, also a Flyers fan. And so I started doing hockey arbitration. So I don't represent players individually in hockey. I'm basically outside counsel to the NHL Players Association, which is a really nice balance. And so since the mid-90s, I've been representing hockey players in arbitration cases. And it's an interesting perspective because, as many people are aware, in baseball, the player submits his salary request, the club submits their salary request, and the arbitration panel picks one or the other. In hockey, the arbitrators can pick a number in the middle. So it's a little bit of a different dynamic, but it's still a very fast-paced, intense, 4 hours as it is in baseball.
And I want to, you talk about a little bit about the differences in the two arbitrations. And well, first of all, how many salary arbitration hearings have you been a part of, baseball and hockey?
Wow. In terms of hearings themselves, I mean, I've probably worked on, some function of a couple hundred cases. But in terms of actual hearings themselves, I have probably argued between 40 and 50, probably split fairly equally between the two sports, maybe a few more in hockey than baseball. Now, some of the hockey cases haven't had decisions. What happens frequently, much more frequently in hockey than baseball, is you argue the case, you present the case, the arbitrators have 48 hours to render an opinion, and it's not unusual for the two sides to reach an agreement in that 48-hour period. So you never get the result in that instance, but ultimately the idea of arbitration is for the two sides to reach some sort of agreement, and if they do, then it works.
Now, also, when you talk about the 48 hours in hockey for the arbitrators to render a decision, baseball arbitrators have 24 hours, right?
Correct.
But hockey arbitrators actually write opinions, correct? And we know
Yes.
Baseball arbitrators don't. So in baseball, you get a result up or down. You either won the case or you lost the case. Don't know why. Hockey, there's at least some opinion, some rationale that's offered. Which of those two approaches do you think are better?
Well, as a lawyer, I mean, I like to read why we won or lost. I mean, I'd like to read the reasoning behind the decision, and so my preference is to have the arbitrators explain why they made the decision that they made. The downside of that sometimes is that arbitrators then get quoted in their, from what they said in their previous cases, in their next hearing. And sometimes, I think they feel perhaps a little bit, boxed in. And so what ultimately happens sometimes is the opinions that you read are kind of vanilla. They're basically a recitation of the argument, and then, very sort of scaled down reasoning and a result. But I like, the bottom line is I like to read the opinion, and I like to know, why the arbitrator made the decision and what their thought process was.
Sure.
Because I know in baseball sometimes if a decision doesn't go the way you think it should, and as bright and professional and experienced as these arbitrators are, when the decision goes the other way, which is not a great feeling, you'd love to know why.
Right. I mean, in baseball, I think one of the things that not having an opinion does, at least in my mind, what it does for me is it really heightens the risk of going into that room, because you have no idea why the arbitrators decide the way they do. Well, let me ask you this, Rex. You've been at this for a while, and I think in 2000 or 2001, I was in, my first arbitration hearing, and have been in arbitration ever since, and have seen it change, right, with the, the advanced stats and things of that nature. But I've also looked back at prior cases. You talked about doing arbitration cases in 1992. And I like to joke that at that time, I mean, they were being done in crayon, right, compared to how they're being done now, right, with the computer graphics and all the advanced stats and everything else. These arbitration books are over 100 pages long. Tell us a little bit about that change in arbitration and how you have adapted to it.
I was, for a time, in the district attorney's office, an appellate lawyer, and so I was used to writing briefs, and so my initial approach, because there really was no set formula for how to present a case or what to write or how back when I started, and so I would write a legal brief, whether it was 25, 30 pages, basically explaining my argument and why with whatever support I needed. And then I would have exhibits, attached to the brief, player stats, comparable player stats. And back then, basically all you had was a baseball register. So you'd be photographing pages of players from the baseball register, and they would be your exhibits. Well, now, obviously, with computer programs and all these websites, and the ability to put together charts, I mean, it's night and day in terms of what was presented back then and what's presented now. Now there's not really a written brief. It's a series of charts and exhibits with obviously some writing, explaining what the purpose of this chart, what this chart shows, what this comparison shows. But like you said, I mean, it's multicolored and graphs and charts and arrows, and but it's very sophisticated because obviously there are a lot more statistics available, computer programs that allow more in-depth comparisons, and so it's probably equally as labor intensive because back then writing a 25, 30 page brief that you like, that's logical, that explains everything that you want to present in a coherent manner, that took a lot of time. But it was nowhere near the 100, 200 page, 300 page presentations that sometimes arbitrators are given today. And so that has changed. But what also has changed, obviously, is, I did a case, in the probably late 80s, early 90s for a player in baseball where the numbers were, if the player won, he would receive $285,000. If he lost, he would be paid $215,000. Well, the minimum salary now is over $500,000. So what has changed is obviously the dollars. As the baseball industry, for instance, has gone from, I guess, like 1.2 billion back then to a $10 billion industry. Salaries have gone up too. So now you have spreads in baseball of $1 million or more, several million dollars. And so, the days back when I first started of arguing over $50,000, $75,000, $100,000, that's nothing today.
Yeah, I think, in fact, on that point, I think Mookie Betts had like a $3 million spread in his case this year. That's a large spread, and most cases aren't that, aren't that far apart. The sides aren't that far apart, but, it does happen. Well, I guess in the end, Rex, we can thank Al Gore, right? Because he invented the internet. And so whether he knows it or not, he's changed baseball arbitration because now we have access to more and more material.
Well, thank you, Al Gore, then. But what, and you, Jeff, as experienced as you are in this, this too. What hasn't changed is the competitive atmosphere. Whether you're arguing over $50,000 or $3 million, it's a fight. And players are competitive people. People on the club side are competitive. Lawyers are competitive. And so, whether you win a case where the spread was $50,000 or $2 million, it's still the same feeling,
No question about it.
And the same effort that you put into it because it's important.
Yeah, you raised an excellent point there. I will tell you, in all the time that I've been in this business, the highest compliment I ever received from one of my clients was I was helping him negotiate a contract, and he was getting close. And you know how it gets, when you go back and forth and now you're starting to get close, you just want to get the deal done. And I can sense that's where he was. But, I had said to him that, this is a multi-million-dollar deal. And I said to him, yeah, but we should try to get this. And it was like an extra $25,000. And I just simply said to him, I said, that's the player's money. And he said to me, that's one thing I appreciate about you because you'll fight for every dollar. And it goes to your point of the competitiveness, right? It's a fight, right? And these players have, if you're on the player side, they have a small window of opportunity to make their money. They're going to retire at age, in their 30s or 40s, if they're lucky to get to the 40s. And it's a fight to get every dollar. I'm not talking about being piggish, but talking about what you said, being competitive and fighting. And I think that's a aspect of this industry that is kind of understood, but a lot of people don't talk about.
And quite frankly, those that do what we do representing players, there are many who do understand that your responsibility, is to your client, and your client's interest comes first. And, it's your obligation, to fight for your client and give your client your best advice in his best interest. But unfortunately, there are too many people, and even if it's one, that's too many, who are on the player's representation side that don't get that or don't practice that. And, that's when players suffer.
Well, let me ask you something that, you and I have spoken about in the past, and I know you feel, very passionately about this, and you sort of hit on it right there, and that is the agent business, the regulation of the agent business, some of the things that you would like to see different in the agent business. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, kind of expanding on the theme that I just touched on. I mean, we learn in law school, and I'm not saying that every lawyer abides by it, but if a lawyer doesn't abide by their code of ethics, they get sanctioned. They could lose their ability to practice law. And fundamentally is it, your client's interest comes first. That's the nature of the relationship. And whether you give your client advice that he or she wants to hear or doesn't, your obligation is to give them your very best advice and best judgment and work as hard as you can in their behalf. And this business, the agent business, obviously has become, it was always competitive, and it's become more and more competitive, which is good because competition obviously makes people tend to work harder, makes people theoretically more competent in their ability to represent players. But unfortunately, it also causes people to try to skip corners and do things that they're not supposed to do in order to attract clients, and whether it's illegal inducements or whatever. And so I think all those sports have regulations that you can't provide illegal inducements to players, and that's understandable and perfectly appropriate. But the problem obviously comes in the enforcement and really catching people who do that, and that's the challenge. But the idea, I think part of the challenge too is also educating players that if somebody is going to cheat to get you as a client, then how do you know that ultimately they're not going to cheat you when it's maybe their best interest versus your best interest? And I think a lot of players, they're young people. They come from different backgrounds, and they may not fully understand the nature of the relationship and what agents really can do. And they sort of look in a understandably more short-sighted manner, like, what can you do for me now? Okay, what equipment can you get me? What can you put in my pocket now, as opposed to how are you going to help my career? How are you going to help make me better? How are you going to do the kind of things off the field so I don't have to worry about anything but taking care of what I need to do on the field? A lot of it has to do with educating players. And I think I know the Major League Baseball Players Association, I know the Hockey Players Association, the two that I'm most familiar with, I know they do a great job trying to educate players. But I just think overall more has to be done. And the ethics of the industry, we need to raise that in some fashion, somehow.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you on that. And switching gears for a moment, I want to talk a little bit about this past baseball offseason. We had a lot of free agents who, good players who stayed out on the market for a while. Many of them did not get the type of deals that they thought they would get, whether it was, Mike Moustakas, Jake Arrieta, a number of players who did not, JD Martinez, even though he did well, but he didn't get anywhere near the $200 million that was the expectation going in. Now, I don't know how realistic that was, but the bottom line is that, we can agree that the market was different. Some have suggested that it was collusion. Some have said it's an anomaly. Some have said, you have to wait and see how things play out over, the remaining years of the collective bargaining agreement. What were your thoughts, or what are your thoughts on this past free agent market in baseball?
I think that there are a number of factors, and to me, perhaps the most significant is the number of clubs that decided not to enter the market, not to try to improve themselves. And whether you want to call it tanking, which is perfectly fair, but there are clubs. It used to be, all 30 clubs would try to do something to improve themselves and I acknowledge that they all have different budgets, but there'd be somebody out there that can help them. But there were a bunch of clubs this off season that basically sat it out, and whether they did it because they wanted to tank or whether they did it because they would figure they would just wait until the tail end when theoretically prices would drop and they'll get somebody on the cheap. I don't know, but there were a lot of clubs that sat it out. At the top, the Dodgers and the Yankees, who traditionally have been big market clubs who were willing to drive the market, they weren't tanking because the Yankees got Giancarlo Stanton, but they had done what they needed to do, and they made decisions that they're not going to increase their payroll, which was already relatively high. So you take those two out of the market, and then you have a bunch of teams at the bottom that just chose not to participate. Now all of a sudden you have maybe 2/3 the number of teams participating. So that has a huge impact. And then as time passed, whether it was by design, collectively, or whether they just all collectively recognized that, maybe if we wait, prices will drop. Well, that's what happened. And, the end result for a number of players was they turned down deals early on and ended up signing for deals that, apparently weren't remotely close to what they could have signed for earlier. If they even got offers. A lot of really good players didn't get offers. So I think, and I hate to hedge, but I think to some degree it's an anomaly. It will surprise me if next offseason, is as drastic as this one. But it does concern me that the clubs in any given offseason choose not to participate, in the free agent process. And that's troubling.
Yeah, and that's a concern that, Tony Clark, the executive director of the MLBPA, has been very vocal about. And so we'll see. We'll see what the next, market brings and the market after that. But certainly this market got a lot of people's attention. Well, Rex, I can't let you go without talking about hoops. And we talked a little bit about your Sixers. But I want to talk about you and your hoops game. I know you play every Friday, or just about every Friday, at a local gym.
I play. I have friends that teach and coach at Swarthmore College near where I live, and friends who are professors at St. Joe University. So I have some choices during the week for lunchtime ball. But
okay.
Look, all I do, my ceiling years ago was a mediocre pass first high school point guard. That was at my peak. Right now,
that was your peak.
that was my peak.
Okay.
So my goal each week is to get invited back next week, and I've learned to do that. You pass, you set picks, and you hustle on defense. That's it.
That's a good formula.
That's it. And fortunately, I'm able to hang in there week after week, doing those three things.
Okay, but I mean, you do shoot every now and then, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I do.
Okay.
My range, has had necessarily to expand from, 15, 18 feet. Those shots get blocked too often. Now I'm beyond the three.
Right.
So.
I think that's what happens when you get older, though, right? When you're younger, you're daring, you drive the lane, you go to the hoop, and then as you get older, you start, the mid-range becomes more important. And then after a while, you start shooting from the opposite baseline. If you have to.
You got it. But yeah, right. So now, as you get older, you drive to the hoop, and then you're going up for the layup, and you realize, well, wait a minute, I'm 8 feet from the basket. I used to be 2 feet from the basket, laying it up. So anyway, that's what changes, and that's what kind of takes away the ability to finish.
So you one of those guys who, like, you play defense, you pick up the guy in the backcourt and just make his life miserable, taking the ball over the midcourt line?
Not the midcourt line. That's a little too aggressive. But no, I mean, yeah, I look, I do it for exercise, so I play as hard as I can. But
okay.
But then defense is fun. I like it. It.
Do you slap the floor?
That's what got me. That's what got me on the court in high school.
You one of those guys who slap the floor when they get ready to play defense?
Jeff, never. Never. Never slapped the floor.
I'm glad.
I played with a guy one time. This was a summer camp, and you talk about he would slap the floor and scream, and he played very little defense. But he thought by doing that, it would show that he's playing defense, but he didn't. It drove me crazy.
Yeah.
So I never did that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because that's one of those things that's just annoying to me. Okay, Rex, I'm gonna give you 5 quick things. I just want to get your thoughts on these 5 quick things, and give me a word or two on them. All right.
Sure.
The first one is a pitch clock in baseball.
Yes.
Ooh,
yes.
I didn't
Speed
think
up
you
the
would
game.
say that.
Yep.
Okay. I got to stop on that one. That surprised me. You would like to see a pitch clock in baseball?
I mean, a reasonable one. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think there are times where I see pitchers. I don't think pitchers need, and I'm not a pitcher, never was, but some pitchers take too much time between pitches, and so I'm not talking about anything drastic, but at least where they know that I got to throw a pitch within this amount of time, and hitters have to be in the box.
Okay, speed up the game. Okay, so then what about this? Player walk-up music.
Nope. Get rid of it.
What? Get rid of it? What?
That's just me. I look, when I first started going to games, this is completely old school, but when I started going to games, you're sitting in the stands. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon in the summer, and you might hear some organ music, but when the next batter's coming up, you just hear cheering. That's it. You don't hear, whatever it is, 15 seconds of whatever type of music that the player wants. No. Announce who's batting like they used to do at Fenway, Yankee Stadium. Let people cheer or whatever. Let the guy walk up and hit.
Wow.
That's too old school, but that I know.
Yeah. Okay, so you surprised me on those first two. Okay, now I know you're from the Philly area, so I got to give you some Philly categories here. The Philadelphia Eagles, and I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, but I'm going to let you get your opportunity. So what are your thoughts on the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, they uplifted this city like nothing I've experienced in my lifetime. It was the coolest run, an underdog team. I mean, the whole story, and the appropriate analogy for for Philadelphia is Rocky. I mean, an underdog. And by the way, a lot of people in Philadelphia believe that Rocky really existed, but
I'm not surprised by that. Not surprised, but after all, these are people who threw snowballs at Santa Claus. Okay, so
one guy.
one guy.
One guy.
Yeah, he had some friends. They were making the snowballs for him, and he was just throwing them.
But it's what it's done for not just the city. I mean this whole tri-state area here, Philadelphia, Delaware, South Jersey, Philadelphia stuff. I mean it's just the psyche of this whole area. I mean it's palpable.
Sure.
What the Eagles have done.
Right, and I'm here in the Southern Jersey area, so I see it and hear it a lot. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid.
3 championships together.
Ooh. Okay. Well, they got to get that first one. We'll see how they do the rest of this NBA playoff season.
I'm not sure number 1 is this year.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But those are 2 very talented young players, and of course you have to be concerned about it. And both of them had some injury history. I mean, Simmons, you're not as concerned about it as with Embiid, but 2 very talented players. And then lastly, Philly cheesesteak. Are you a Philly cheesesteak guy?
Absolutely.
Ooh.
And I will not have a cheesesteak anywhere else in the country.
Why is that?
Because I've tried them elsewhere and they don't taste the same. Philly cheesesteaks only taste. You got it.
That's okay. And as close as I am to Philadelphia, because I'm about 45 minutes outside Philadelphia, I've never had a Philly cheesesteak. And it's not because of anything. I'm not a cheesesteak eating guy. So I'll save it for you and for your friends. And so, but let me ask you though, if you eat cheesesteak, I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons why you got to hit the court every Friday too, right? Got to burn that off.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why the guys that I used to be asked to guard, I'm not asked to guard anymore. Yeah. The guys I'm guarding tend to be a little bit chunkier than the guys I used to guard. No, right. But here's a funny story about Philly cheesesteak. So one of my best friends in the business and retired client is a player named Andy Phillips, who played for the Yankees, then coached at University of Alabama. So he comes into Philadelphia, and his wife was coming to see him. And so I said, Andy, where do you want to eat? Do you want to go Italian? You want to go to a steakhouse? He goes, oh, no. We have to go for Philly cheesesteaks. I'm saying, no, you come to Philadelphia. Let me take you to someplace really nice. He goes, no, Bethany and I, we want you to take us, get a good Philadelphia cheesesteak. So I took Andy and Bethany Phillips to Pat Steaks, which is, if you've been there, it's in South Philly, sits there on a street corner. Probably you basically sit on a sidewalk, one of 4 or 5 tables, and you got to go up, you have to order, and you have to order it the right way. If you take too long, they send you to the back of the line and go next. So that was our meal. They loved it, and every time they come back, they want to go get a Philly's cheesesteak.
Wow. I'm taken by the story that you can actually go to a restaurant ready to spend your money, and if you don't order right, they're going to send you to the back of the line. That's just amazing to me. Only in Philadelphia can that happen.
And nobody leaves. You put your head down, go to the back of the line, and then wait your turn. And just know that when you get up there again, you got to be ready to order your cheese whiz wid.
No pressure, but just get your order right.
You got it.
All right. Last thing, Rex, I have for you, in terms of, your profession and your agent business, anything new on the horizon coming up? Any plans for Rex Gary Sports? And you've been at this for a while. What does the future hold?
The great thing about the future in this business is, you don't know what it holds. And, I always keep my eyes and ears open for new challenges and new opportunities. And clients, quite frankly. I mean, even though I've been doing this, for as long as I've been doing it, and have some fantastic people as clients or players that I used to represent that are now friends, and I stay in touch. You never know when the next opportunity is going to come, and keep your eyes and ears open. And, a lot of my players that I represented are now coaching. And so that sort of, allowed me to evolve and I've begun to represent guys who are now coaching or broadcasting, both at the college and professional level. And I'm always open for new opportunities, and the more you get out there and the more people you meet, you get an occasional referral, you get an opportunity to speak to people at universities, law schools, and it's, to me, it's all fun, and it's the decision that I made in the early '90s to do this. Like any business, it's had its ups and downs, times of heightened anxiety and times of elation. But I wouldn't have done anything different looking back.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. Good to hear that you're, still out there scanning the horizon and see what might be out there. So, Rex, well, I really thank you, man, for coming on today. And go ahead.
It's my pleasure, Jeff. And the one thing I wanted to add to that, because it's a part of our relationship, you always have to keep and look for the opportunity to laugh. You keep laughing,
right?
Keep it fun, keep it light. Don't take things overly serious. And just be appreciative for the opportunities that we have.
Yeah, no question about it. Yeah. And we often do that when we get together, have a good laugh. So, I appreciate that. So, and like I said, I do appreciate you coming on today and being with us here, Sports 360, Rex Gary. And I'm sure, Rex, we'll catch up down the road, all right?
Really, my pleasure, Jeff. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with veteran sports agent Rex Gary. If you did, let us know. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you think. In the meantime, we have another great show in store for you. So be sure to make plans to join us again on the next episode of Sports 360. As always, Scully takes us home in style. See you next time.